Welcome to the Elite Agent Masterclass. Today I have the great pleasure of being joined by the UK's leading psychological performance coach, Mr. Stephen-James Copp. I've had the pleasure of spending time with Stephen before now, and I'll be quite honest, I spent time with Stephen and was absolutely mesmerised by so much of the content that Stephen shared with me. So we recently spoke. There's a lot of subjects and topics that are very mainstream right now that need covering, and Stephen for me is the number one person for you to be listening to get what you need from a performance perspective, but also in the pursuit of happiness in life. So Stephen, welcome to the Elite Agent Masterclass. How are you?
Good to see you again, James.
Likewise.
It's such a pleasure to have you guys here again. It was an absolute pleasure last year, and looking forward to our conversation today, wherever that leads us.
Absolutely. And I must say, just before we dive in, we are going to be sharing this in video form as well. So if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, you may want to watch this. We're in a beautiful setting at Stephen's home. So hop over onto our YouTube channel, the Elite Agent Masterclass, to experience this in its full form. But Stephen, where to start? When we first arrived today, we immediately started chatting about the power of the mind and neuro-linguistic programming. And so I really just wanted initially to open the floor, based on some of the topics that you and I have conversed about before now, to help the people out there understand the wiring and the way in which people can command their own narrative.
Yeah.
So where best, from your perspective, where would you say would be a best place to start to help people on that journey?
Well, let me open this conversation. So I want to tell you a story.
Okay.
Because really today's theme, I suppose, is about stories.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that? I think there's a real misconception out there that a leopard never changes its spots. We are who we are. We think the way we think. That's just who we are. Accept it. And I think that's the biggest myth in psychology, but also probably in human nature. That's not the truth, James. It's not the truth. I've done my job now 35 years, 25 years as a performance psychologist, and I can say with some certainty that I've seen people completely transform from one version to another. And people often say, what sort of juju is this? And of course, there was a time we believed it was witchcraft. There was a time that there were spells and people used stuff, there were witches in the past ages. Where we are now with psychology is really exciting. And it's really exciting because of the advent of what's called functional MRI scanning. What does that mean? It means we know how the brain works. We have a best practice model for thinking. For the first time in history, we can say to somebody, this is how you're thinking, but you know what? If we thought this way, or we had this belief, or we changed that belief, you would react and respond and have a more fulfilling life and career. So for the first time in history, we know what best practice thinking. We have role models of people who live really successful and happy lives. So we can coach. So a lot of psychologists, rather than saying I'm a psychologist or I'm clinical or creating a clinical environment, what we're doing is we're beginning to create environment in coaching, much the same as we have it in sports. If you're an athlete and you're a boxer and I'm your coach and I watch you box, I watch you spar, I might say, hey James, I'm observing you from the outside. You can't see it because you're in the fight, but I'm observing you, and I might say, use your left jab a bit more. Be more offensive, more defensive. Watch the behavior of the other person. You can't see that, but I can coach you on what's best practice in your boxing. Well, why can't we do the same with the brain? And the answer to that question is we couldn't in the past because we didn't know what best thinking was. We didn't have the models. And then really in the 70s, that question was poised by two great scientists, one called Bandler and another called Grinter. And they were from Santa Monica University in California. And they posed the question, who's the most effective psychologist? Because in the 70s, psychology is all getting a bit woo-woo. A lot of psychoanalogy, a lot of unicorns and space stuff. But who gets the results? Throughout the last 100 years, who really is good? And they studied pretty much every eminent psychologist, your Jungs and your Alders and your Freuds, all the tops. And they came up with one name at the very top. There were a couple others, but the one that came out was Milton Erickson.
Okay.
And Milton Erickson was a genius, really. And he was a genius because he got results. And he got results because he realized that people were filtering their experience through a data set of experiences in their brain. So everybody would experience life through a different lens. He then realized that you could change that lens. you could change that lens. So let me give you a simple example. We might go to a theme park, me and you, James, and we might go to a roller coaster. We go on the roller coaster. You have no bad experiences in your life of roller coasters. Maybe I had a bad experience when I was young of a roller coaster. You go on, we go round, I scream and I'm vomiting because I'm terrified. My blood pressure is up, cortisol's being released, adrenaline, I'm hyperventilating, having a panic attack. You might go round, have exactly the same physiological responses. Your heart rate's up, adrenaline's being released, but you see that as excitement, it's fun. The perception is very different.
Yeah.
The perception, same experience. So what I'm saying is now we have a great opportunity. This is a really good time in psychology, in time for humans, where we can future author. Jordan Peterson, colleague, does a great program called Future Authoring. It's online. I won't sponsor it, I'm sure Jordan put it out there. But it's a great program whereby you can future author, whereby you can write your future. You can write how you want to think. You can analyze and understand the bad places in where you think and adjust that and reframe that to be good. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think using the roller coaster analogy is a very, very good one, because that then is, I suppose, very transferable into people's day-to-day lives.
100%.
Some people will move through certain challenges with great ease.
Yeah.
It will, like you say, create the adrenaline, heighten the blood pressure, but they thrive. So in the business environment, for example, you have very high-performing people that thrive under immense pressure.
Right.
That's their go-to place almost. Whereas others, they really struggle with coping under pressure.
Yeah.
But they're experiencing exactly the same inputs.
100%. Same biological reactions. Blood pressure's going up, adrenaline release, cortisol. Some like that. Some chase it. They jump out of aeroplanes.
Yeah.
Because their data set of reference, and that's what we're talking about. We all have a data set of reference in our brains. All of our life experiences, everything we've ever seen, read, mixed with, everybody we think of. That is the filter through which we filter every experience, as is good or bad.
I think it's an interesting point you make, because on a personal level, I was actually talking to my business partner about this recently, and this will be interesting for the business owner side, and I think you might well be able to help give some feedback on this. We were talking, and I basically said, the business is in a very good, steady, stable place right now. We're on track to hit all of the goals that we set at the beginning of the year. Everything's moving quite nicely.
Yeah.
That presents a challenge for me, because my natural bias, the narrative I've created, the story, the data set I've created for myself, is that I'm a problem solver.
Right.
I'm very good at problem solving.
Right.
And in the past, I then recognised in myself that in the past, I will then go and look for problems, and in many respects create problems, so that I can then be the hero to then fix them problems. Whereas right now, because everything's so steady, it's like, well, now what?
Right.
Because I've convinced myself I'm a problem solver. So it works in the same vein.
100%.
Because that's the narrative I've told myself.
100%.
So how does someone, not necessarily me personally, but how does someone then change the story?
First, by being aware of what the existing story is. And most of the time, I'll work with clients, and I'm so honoured and privileged to work with some of the greatest people in this country and around the world indeed. They're a privilege, every one of them. Whereby, very often, the narrative can be, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Now, that's not a conscious narrative, but that's what's subconsciously driving a lot of our beliefs. I'm not enough. And we've got social media at the moment, which really feeds into that narrative, because it's not presenting reality as it is. So all the guys are looking very muscular and very well trained, and that's wonderful, and that's great to see. But how much of that is manufactured? How much of that is artificial? How much is that realistic for most guys, young men? And with the girls and the ladies, they see these women very beautiful. How much time have they been in hair and makeup? And while that's wonderful, I embrace that, it challenges, and as a father of two daughters, it challenges my daughters when they look at social media, they judge themselves. Yeah. So we have this mirror now in life, which we need to be really conscious of, which isn't reflecting a true reflection of who you are and what our worldview is. So everybody's worldview at the moment tends to be a little bit skew-whiffed. And in particular, an interest of mine is young men. There are a lot of disenfranchised young men at the moment. We're in a very scary period where men are feeling challenged, they are feeling undermined, they're unsure as to what is masculinity. And it's a really delicate, I'm conscious how delicate that is, and I'm conscious of not going too deep, but what is masculinity? What is femininity? Yeah. How do I become a man? Is there such thing in the modern world as a man? What does a modern man look like? And these questions are posing great what we call cognitive dissonance, great conflict. And part of my purpose, I suppose, is to start to educate. And it's education, first awareness, then education as to this is what you're thinking because of this.
Yeah.
Now we can change that. We can reframe and change that thought and give you evidence to support a new thought that gets rid of that old thought, hence a new framework of thought. And that's really powerful. That's really powerful and exciting.
Absolutely. As I'm listening to you, it sounds so simple, but I suppose that is the nature of why you are now posed as the UK's #1 leading psychological performance coach, because you take very complex scenarios and make them much more digestible on a more mainstream level. So it probably isn't as simple as you're making it sound in delivery, but actually, as long as people understand, if you've got an awareness and you've got a desire for change, because that's important, right? Awareness and then desire.
100%.
If there is no desire to change, you're aware of the problems you may face or the challenges you may face, you actually don't have the desire to change, then actually the next stage of education becomes almost redundant because you're not open-minded enough.
Completely.
So in the process of change, what steps do people, in your view, what process do they go through? How does that then come about?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, and one which is multifaceted. So we use a number of techniques, whether it be narrative ethics, transactional analysis, NLP, one of my favorites, neuro-linguistic programming. And what that does is that challenges your existing belief. So let's take the fact that once upon a time you believed in Father Christmas.
Yeah.
We all did. I did. I still do, I think. But I did. I believed we all did in Father Christmas. You don't now. Why not? Why not? What happened along the way? There's nothing complex happened, James.
No.
There was no great psychological intervention. Something
changed.
happened, something changed. What changed is you got data.
Yeah.
You got data. You grew up, you got data, and you realised the reality of this man delivering 8 billion gifts in one night is some feat. And by the way, I'm not dismissing, for all the children watching, I'm not going to dismiss the fact there is a Father Christmas, but the chances are pretty unlikely. So your brain then sifts through the data as we grow. Your data set grows as you grow with age, and as part of that data set we have more referencing. Let's not forget the brain is a LLM, large language model, like ChatGPT. And ChatGPT draws its information from the internet. That's its data set from the internet. We ask it a question, it goes off, it looks at all the potential responses, finds the most common one, the one which is more than likely to be the correct answer, and it gives you an answer. Not always correct, by the way. That's still not correct. The brain's the same. And bearing in mind that the recent report said that one pinhead of the brain, where memory's stored, one pinhead, not safety pin, not tack, pinhead, holds 1 petabyte, 1.4 petabytes of storage. A petabyte is 1,000 terabytes. And as you know, 1,000 terabytes, 1,000 gigabytes is a terabyte. So 1 petabyte, one pinhead.
It's an insanely large amount of data.
Insane. And we're not utilising that. And instead we're using AI tools, which is going to make this brain redundant, because we're relying upon LLM, large language model data sets on the internet to do the thinking for us. So what do you think is going to happen to the hippocampus and certain parts of the brain?
It'll start to switch off.
Correct. And there's already evidence of that in younger children. As the brain's forming, it's forming slightly differently to our brain and to our parents' brain, where you have to think.
I've got a question coming back to the Father Christmas analogy, and it's a very good one. A very good analogy, not a good question, sorry. So the question is this. The Father Christmas analogy. So the belief in Father Christmas stems from our upbringing, where our parents are our main influencers.
Correct.
So they then, because obviously there's the innocence and the beauty of believing in Father Christmas and the whatever else that goes with that. But then as you get older, you're then going to school and you're surrounded by other influences, and then obviously the belief starts to change, because all of a sudden, is he real? Is he not? Questions being raised by society in that school environment, for example. So my question is this: when someone is coming to you on a one-to-one basis and you're working with them on a one-on-one, society is telling them one thing, but you're coaching them on they should believe, because this is right and it's correct. You should think this way. How do you cross that bridge? Because society is telling them a completely different story. And if the human mind is so heavily influenced by the outside world, how do they move away from that outside influence and really dial in on what you're sharing with them?
And I think that's a really profoundly insightful question, as always, James. And the answer is really quite complex and convoluted, but I'll give it a go. It goes something like this. When I first engage with a client, my first thing I say is I want you to disengage with anybody who's overly influential. So we got to shut out noise.
Okay.
So first point, surround yourself with people who support the narrative you want to believe. To support the narrative that is your best, is the narrative that serves you the best.
Okay.
So let's find the narrative that serves you the best, which is, James, I know you're travelling soon and sounds really exciting.
Yep.
And maybe that's been challenged. I'm not saying it has, but maybe it's been challenged by some people who are more conventional. And there's no right or wrong here. But you and your wife and your family have made a choice that you would like to travel with your children. I think that's amazing, by the way. Now, my point to you, if you were speaking to me, is you've made a decision. It's an informed decision. I happen to think it's a really wise decision, but you've made a decision. First things first, is anybody who says anything against that decision, we need to be careful of and keep at a boundary, respectfully,
of course,
always respectfully, and surround ourselves with people who support that decision. And surround ourselves with information, data, books, documentaries, watch everything that supports that narrative. For instance, here we make our own water. It's not for sale, unfortunately, but we make our own water. We've got a well, make our own water. We draw our own water, and we've branded it. This is called Newlands Farm, where I live, and we call it Newlands Calm. So we make living here a fully immersive experience, and anybody who comes to stay with me, if I do a retreat or somebody wants to stay, I'll ask them their favourite colour, what books they need to read, and I'll design their bedroom they're staying in. We're fortunate we've got 7 bedrooms, so it suits the narrative of the story where I'm trying to take them. So we're being fully immersed in drinking calm water. We have calm conversations. We use calm language if it's somebody wanting to be calm.
Of course.
It might be somebody wanting to perform at a higher pace and needs to be more stoic. It might be somebody who wants to have a more considered approach in business. How do I work at a higher level? How do I have a bigger impact, yet not let that impact my family life? That's a question I ask a lot. Okay, so let's break that down and understand what narratives we need to change. So we'd first understand what you're looking to change, how you're currently thinking, and then start challenging that thinking and looking at alternatives. Hence the word reframe, because we call it a framework. The framework in which we think is a framework. Let's create a new framework. Let's talk about a new framework. Just being aware of a new framework is enough to break that pattern of behaviour and belief. It's enough for you to consider, that's a different option for me. And the result of that thinking would be more positive for me. And the brain will always do what it feels is best for you. That's the key principle of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. It'll always do what it feels is serving you the best.
Yeah.
So if you give it an option to take a better decision, and it recognises it's going to give you a better net result, it will do it cybernetically, automatically. You don't need to think about it. I just need to broaden your database of knowledge and say, James, have you thought about this? Have you thought about considering this way of understanding that situation? No, that's interesting. Okay, it's gone in. There's no magic. It's simply science. Yeah. And I think really what I'd love to get across in these series of interviews is we now understand the science behind self-authoring, future authoring, being able to control how we think. Most people go through life like a pinball in a pinball machine, being emotionally reactive.
Yes.
Boom, 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 boom. Somebody said this to me today, I feel terrible. Somebody said I was overweight, underweight, I feel terrible. Not necessarily, but you can negate that. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But people do. What I'm saying is be responsive. By responsive, I mean consider your options. Am I going to lose my mind and be very upset? Or am I going to recognise that person's got different points of reference, different data sets, therefore they're going to think very differently to me, and that's okay. But I'm not going to adopt that.
Let them be.
Let them be. Let them be. Always with peace, always with gratitude, and always recognising what you're doing has to be about you. Not being selfish. It's about, I've got a brain, much like a muscle in a gym. I've got a brain, and I want that brain to be as fit and as clean and as healthy and as focused on my key objectives.
Yeah.
Whatever they be. Let's identify them, and then let's structure the brain for that. Whether it be an athlete, a billionaire, a millionaire, a successful father, husband, all of the above. What does that look like? And we have models of what that looks like. Let's replicate the model.
And I think that's an interesting point you touch on. And I think of someone that is a friend of mine who has reached out a few times to me. He runs a business, and by all intents and purposes, his business is successful, and it's providing him and his family a lifestyle. But he isn't happy with that. He wants to change careers, and he's probably been in this headspace for, I would imagine, 10 years.
Right.
And he regularly reaches out and he's like, "What do you think I should do?" And I'm like, "Well, it's not really for me to determine what you should do,
right.
but you're not happy, so therefore you need to do something different.
Right.
But what are you then going to do?" And it's then at that point that the conversation almost just closes down, because he is the pinball.
Right.
He is reacting to a situation and it's making him unhappy, but
right.
he isn't then taking the time to look to the future and go, "But what do I actually want?"
Right.
All he continues to say is, "What don't I want?" Which is fine. That's acknowledgement, it's recognition, but then what?
Yeah.
You have to move towards what it is.
100%.
And I've quite often said, "Well, but what is it you want?"
And I think, James, that's a really powerful point. So the majority of people, because the brain's always looking for safety, top of the line,
yeah.
what it does by default is looks for security and safety.
And so the unhappy existence is safe because it provides financially.
Correct. So the brain always looks for reason, to support, for safety, for security, by default. But here's the thing. What if we get the brain to look for positive outcomes? People often get caught up in a negative mindset because they allow their brain to run riot and they have no control over it. What I'm saying is, you have a choice, you have an option. You have an option. The brain, if left to be emotionally led, will be constantly scanning, be hypervigilant, looking for negative reinforcement of their existing negative beliefs.
And I think that's the thing that, can you make that even more layman's? I think that's such a key point that people listening in need to understand.
Yeah, we can. So, if I have a bad experience and I move forward, that bad experience goes into my data set. All experiences go into this data set. Yeah. It's part of the brain, and let's not get technical, but it's a part of the brain. Let's call it a skip, a bin, doesn't matter. A database.
Yeah.
All the experiences go. I have a bad experience. If when I grew up in an environment where I didn't feel too safe, I didn't feel too secure, it'd be very easy for me to grow up with a worldview that the world is dangerous and that there's a lot of danger out there. That makes me hypervigilant for danger. If I grew up in a very regulated environment where I felt safe, where I was exposed to safe activities, where I overcome dangerous situations, then I grew up with a worldview that the world is a safe place. If we watch the news every night, which at the moment, isn't positive, it'd be very easy to think that people are being stabbed everywhere. And indeed, people are being stabbed, and it's extremely disturbing. But it'd be very easy for young children to observe that and watch that and build a worldview that it's a dangerous place out there.
Yeah.
And it's not. The reality is, the majority of the world, most people are good. Most people are happy, most people are kind, and most people aren't going to stab you. There are some.
Yeah. But
the chances of that happening are very slim. So what do? Do we focus on the negative, which is actually the minority?
Yeah.
Or do we say to ourselves, no, I'm gonna focus on the positive, and I'm going to understand that my brain can sometimes play tricks, and it's only looking out for me. It's only trying to take care of me. Remember that. It's just trying to look after you and keep you safe. But sometimes I think you need to have a chat with yourself. And I think everybody should go through some form of coaching. Maybe at school, we should have a national program within the schools where we teach children to emotionally regulate, to step back from the situation and just take a moment to say, let's have a look at this. Let's not react and respond. That first initial reaction is always emotional. Yeah. So that's always about fear. Let's respond. Let's think about this. Consider the reality of this situation. Is this alleyway dangerous for me to walk down? No. I'm in the middle of Worcester. I'm in my own grounds. Is it dangerous for me to walk around this lake? I could fall in and drown in the lake, sure. But the chances are I'm not. The banks are pretty stable. They've been there for 400 years. Yeah. So we use rationale, we use logic, and we use modelling of people who are very comfortable in life. How do they think? How do they live their lives?
Yeah.
Surround yourself with good people, good thoughts, good reading, good experiences, the fact you're travelling, amazing experiences, and with time the brain will begin to change. And that's called neuroplasticity, the ability for the brain to adapt new synapses, new neural pathways, and a new personality. And let me just park that in inverted commas. I don't mean a completely different James, but I mean James slightly more, and you are relaxed anyway, but if you were a little neurotic, a little scared, a little nervous, James is a little bit more composed, and relaxed, because he realizes the world I live in is quite safe, and I've got the evidence for that, and I'm fully immersing myself in that.
And I suppose those changes, I think people need to understand that those changes won't be overnight. They will be changes over time. They may be changes that will happen that initially you probably don't recognise.
Yeah.
You don't see it happening because it happens so gradually,
Yeah.
I would assume.
Yeah.
And I think going back to the point you made around the negative environment maybe that they might have grown up in,
Right.
and how that may shape their worldview. I think it's that story, isn't it? It's that story that's been planted in their brain from a very
100%.
young age, that I'm not safe, so I constantly need to look for safety.
Or I'm not good enough.
Or I'm not good enough, because that's a story that
It is
has
a
been
story.
told. It's not fact, it's just a story that has been implanted in your brain.
Correct.
But there is the possibility, a very, very, well, it's not a possibility, the reality is that if you want that story to change, it can be changed. That's the whole point
100%.
of the process. The story can be changed.
It's not static, it's dynamic. This is a dynamic, it's dynamic, it can change, it's constantly changing. And you might have an organic experience which changes that, something which happens by mistake. You might grow up with a fear of snakes, and one day you happen to lift a rock and a snake comes over to you and you touch it and you find, oh my, it didn't try and bite me, it ran away. Hang on a minute. That immediately raises suspicion. Do those snakes really want to bite me? And the reality is, most just want to get away.
Yeah.
They only ever bite if you step on them. Well, I would bite if somebody stepped on me.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I'm as peaceful can be.
Yeah.
So logic is really good. So there's a certain field of psychology called Cartesian logic, where we apply logic. But you say things can't change, they change slowly. Things can change really fast.
Okay.
So I've seen realizations, and they're called realizations because you suddenly realize, that's tosh. That's nonsense what I've been thinking. I'll give you an example. You're a child. I've got a wood burner in my lounge. I'm telling you that wood burner's hot, don't touch it. You have no experience, no data, no reference to that wood burner. So what do you do as a young James? You go up, you stick your hand on it, right? In an instant, your belief of that wood burner has changed. You'll never touch a wood burner again. Pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pain. So instantly, the pain, and often pain is the great motivator,
Of course.
but pain is, I know that's now hot. I don't need to listen to what Stephen says or anybody else or what James says. I know that's hot. Your belief around that wood burner has completely changed, and that's going to impact your worldview going forward massively. So that was just in an instant. So my job is to create really compelling arguments, like a game of chess, to challenge your narrative around a specific subject that you've brought to me. You might come and say, Stephen, I've got a real problem with this. Okay, let's map it. What's the problem? It's for me to create a compelling enough argument that puts you in checkmate. It's a game of chess where you've got nowhere to go other than, you're right. That's wrong, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe somebody or somewhere you picked up the wrong information along the way, and you've got corrupt data in your database, or at the very least it's not serving you well.
Yeah.
And half the time it's not intentional. Most parents love their children and they don't realise the damage they do. You know, myself included, I'm a parent, I try my hardest, but I'm sure I make mistakes, as I'm sure you do, we all do.
Of course, yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, we can put that right. We can audit our brains, literally audit our thinking. Then we can identify what we do want, what we don't want, what serves the cause of James's life, success, performance, family, happiness, calmness, health. What thinking supports that? The rest, let's get rid of. Let's negate. Let's recognise it serves no purpose. That's somebody else's nonsense that they've projected onto us.
What a fantastic episode. And I'm pretty sure, much like myself, anybody listening in to Stephen sharing some of that value there, they will probably be starting to challenge some of their own thoughts and belief patterns. As I'm sitting there, I'm listening to Stephen talk and I'm thinking about certain things that go through my mind occasionally and I think, that doesn't serve me. So that is part one of a series that we will be recording with Stephen. Make sure that you tune in for part two, where we'll be delving deeper into a lot of what we've explored today. Stephen, for the first episode, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure, James. Absolute pleasure.